Chapter 4 The Wind Seeker. The four-leaf clover, sprouting amid an explosion of daisies, moved so slightly that it might easily have been the result of the faintest breath of wind. Only Godric the old eagle, or wind seeker, would have noticed as he arced effortlessly and silently overhead. There it was again. Breeze or breakfast? Godric's eyes were locked on the movement like a heat-seeking missile locks onto an enemy plane.
A nice juicy furtail for starters, perhaps, before I pluck a delicious grey flapper from the river a little later,
he mused to himself contentedly. The eye in the sky never blinked as a white snout disturbed the dew, collecting a droplet as it poked out and sniffed the morning air. A pair of pink beady eyes like red currants followed, and only then did Godric relax every sinew.
It's only the white Spikeshuffler,
he sighed, disappointed in one way but quite pleased in another. 4 seasons had passed, a long time in the life of a Spikeshuffler, and Snowdrop had continued to survive. More than that, he had earned a grudging respect across the meadow because he had lived when all around him expected him to die, although the other Spikeshufflers still kept their distance. Today he was out for an early poke around. He was always the first to emerge in the morning. Life was too short for sleeping. There was too much to explore. Godric didn't eat Spikeshufflers. They were far too prickly, unlike furtails, field mice, and grey flappers, rainbow trout, from the river, his preferred courses. Spikeshufflers really weren't worth the trouble, and if you couldn't eat them, you might as well get to know them. He and Snowdrop weren't exactly best friends. Snowdrop had suggested it once, but Godric had insisted it simply wasn't possible.
The space between the ground and the sky is too great for Spikeshufflers and windseekers to become close,
Godric had declared a little pompously. But he was prepared to accept that the white Spikeshuffler was out of the ordinary, and he'd grown to quite like him since the day he'd saved him from the sly body. He didn't really know why he'd done that. It was probably as much his dislike for Schemer and all sly bodies as his compassion for Snowdrop that had stirred him into action. He'd swooped down and plucked up the Spikeshuffler in his talons just as the weasel was about to kill him. The old eagle had been compelled to watch the young Spikeshuffler's progress ever since. He would perch on a branch or fence and pass the time of day with the young Spikeshuffler, discussing the weather and local animal gossip such as the birth of a new litter of fox cubs, the death of an ancient badger, or the latest weasel fight. "Did you hear the screams? The sly bodies were fighting again last night," Snowdrop would report.
"It's time they were banned from the meadow,"
Godric would invariably declare. More than anything, the little white Spikeshuffler loved to talk to the Windseeker about flying. The idea of soaring on the wind, hovering one minute and diving the next, fascinated him and filled him with longing. "What's it like to be a Windseeker? Does it take long to learn? Is it hard to hover? How do you glide without moving your wings?" The questions always came thick and fast, and Godric basked in the attention. If only the Spikeshuffler knew. Gliding might look effortless, but every muscle in the wings was working to play its part. To Snowdrop, flying represented freedom, a new world. It made his 4 stumpy little legs seem totally inadequate, even if they could carry him faster than any other Spikeshuffler. They were so short he couldn't even see over a dockleaf patch. Even the nose twitchers, rabbits, could jump high enough to see over a dockleaf patch. Godric, in contrast, could see everything, and Snowdrop had a recurring dream in which his legs turned into wings and he could fly like a windseeker. As Snowdrop emerged from the clump of daisies, an enticing smell reached his nostrils. The aroma came from across the road which had bisected the animal's world 2 winters past. "Biscuits," he whispered to himself. "Food of the gods." Ethel Gibbons, the old lady who had refused to sell up when the road builders moved in, often brought fresh water and tidbits across to the edge of the meadow for the wild creatures. This time she'd left a big plateful of home-made ginger biscuits outside her cottage door to entice Smarty Pants, her beloved ginger cat, back home after a night out. Newly baked biscuits was a scent Snowdrop couldn't resist, even though it meant crossing the great concrete river. It was as though an invisible thread was tied to his nose and was pulling him irresistibly in the direction of crumbly biscuit heaven. Up above, the all-seeing Godric cried out a warning, but it was lost in Snowdrop's fog of desire.